on This Week in History with Paul Waite.
Oh, I was expecting something to happen then, Drew. And hello, listeners. Listeners on the camera, listeners. Well, special viewers, aren't you? We've got listeners and viewers. It's very confusing being Paul these days. All these things I'm expected to do. And, of course, I am only a dinosaur. There you are, people. You write in and tell me what sort of dinosaur I might be. I know if Callum was here now, he'd say something very rude and hurtful. He's just powdering his nose at the moment. So anyway, welcome to the ever-popular On This Week in History. And starting off today, thanks for the whoops there, Drew. In 1189, riots started in Lynn, so I presume it was now called King's Lynn, in the Norfolk and spread across to Norwich in England. So this is 123 years after the Norman invasion, and the king, I think, is Henry II. Could be wrong. May even be Richard the Lionheart, actually. So there was civil unrest for quite a long time after the Norman invasion. So a bit of rioting to start off. The very sad fact next, 1554. And I hope Drew actually knows this lady's name, Lady Jane Grey.
I don't know.
As she is gone down in history as Queen for 9 days. So poor old Jane Grey was a teenage girl, with very weak claim to the English throne. When Henry VIII died, and then his son, who was also Protestant, Edward VI, died when he was about 14. Boy king, would have been a great king, I think. Was king for about 6 years, I think, as a child. And effectively the Protestants in the country didn't want Mary, who was the legitimate claimant to the throne, to take over. And so Lady Jane Grey was put forward in her stead, and she was queen for 9 days. And then she was beheaded at the age of 17 or whatever. And it makes me very sad, actually. You know, not because obviously Jane herself was entirely innocent of anything. And again, it's a bit like the thing with Monmouth and James II. Now, of course, Mary was probably one of the most unpopular monarchs in history. And, of course, eventually we had one of the greatest, or if not the greatest monarch in English history, Elizabeth I, who, of course, was a Protestant, who would have been, probably at the time, it's just as well, I suppose, you could argue that Lady Jane Grey had to fall for Elizabeth to be still able to take the throne after Mary died. So anyway, rest in peace, Jane. I'll think about it. It's one of these things that's in my heart, actually. I can't explain it. 1633, really interesting fact, this. The Inquisition, so the famous Spanish Inquisition, forced Galileo Galilei, so you've heard of Galileo, I hope?
Galileo.
So you have like well, that's why his name is after him, yeah. One of the founders of modern science, to recant his theory that the Earth, in fact, moved around the sun. So, of course, the view of the Church was that God created everything, and the Earth was the centre of everything. So, the thought that that we were in fact was complete heresy. So, it's quite interesting. 1692. This is again something that means a lot to me. I'm not sure I've talked about it ever live before. In 1692 was the very famous massacre at Glencoe, where I'm glad that Callum has walked in at this point. So we had the very famous massacre at Glencoe, where 38 MacDonald clan were killed by the Campbells, effectively. The Campbells being effectively probably the most influential clan at the time. The Campbells very much on the side of the British. Something about the MacDonalds. This is so just again to set the scene. This is just after William of Orange has become King of England. William of Orange being a Protestant. And the reason the Campbells gave for the slaughter was effectively that the MacDonalds were a bit slow in making clear their allegiance. The reason why, apart from the fact that obviously Nicola Sturgeon has done a lot to destroy this in me, but I spent all of my formative years basically being as Scottish as I was English. I had maps of Scotland all over my wall. I have been to Rob Roy McGregor's grave, for instance. I've been to Glencoe. And the MacDonalds were probably the clan that I most looked up to.
Really?
Look at Conan or something. To
Yeah,
me, the
sure.
McDonald's.
Sure, yeah.
The McDonald's were, and I was very fortunate insofar as, if you call it fortunate. So when I did my great 1,000-mile bike ride from John O'Groats to Land's End, I actually cycled up Glencoe Mountain past the site where the McDonald's were massacred. And probably, and Callum would be a good person to be in the room when I say this, I would say that day would probably mark the sporting achievement of my lifetime. So I cycled 136 miles in one day, left Inverness at 9 o'clock, and cycled up Glencoe Mountain. It's called something else, I don't know. And I remember when I got to the hotel in Clonlarrick, which was one of the great experiences of my lifetime, because they were just such wonderful people. When I turned up in the reception, and a lovely lady, and she says to me, "Where is your car?" And I said, "No, I cycled." "Where did you cycle from?" And she went, "It's not possible." she would not believe. She didn't believe someone could have cycled from Inverness to there in 8 hours.
Yeah.
136 miles and cycled up the mountain,
Well,
Wow.
yeah.
But I was out on my feet, Drew, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, it's not surprising.
Probably as tired as I've ever been. Anyway, Paul's talked too much again, as always.
On This Week in History.
Welcome back to On This Week in History, and we have the second instalment today for you. Next bit of self-indulgence. So, some of you will know that I studied history to A-level standard, and probably the greatest general and king that I studied, in my opinion, who has been a big influence on me, is King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden, who is my idea of pound for pound the greatest man of all time, by the way.
I remember you said that before, yeah.
Greatest general. Swedes. So again, people, I know you guys didn't study history much at school. So if I just start off, I just want to set the scene, really. So in 1700, the Great Northern War started. And effectively, we have Denmark, Norway, and Russia all fighting against Sweden.
Wow.
Right, or the Swedish Empire, as it then was. So it's just remarkable. You think of the power that Sweden was actually strong enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then in 1706, the Swedes defeated the Russian army at the Battle of Freistadt. Gustavus Adolphus was an amazing guy. Of course, in those days, of course, so sort of going back into sort of 1600, 1700, 1800, Central and Eastern Europe Eastern Europe didn't really exist as a concept. So you would have had the Swedes, would have seen the Poles as sort of almost like we would the Scots or something,
Yeah, sure.
So read about, I might do a programme about King Gustavus because he's such a good chap. And then sticking with the northern theme, in 1814, Norway proclaimed its independence from Denmark, I believe. Could have been Sweden, I'm not sure. Should check out, shouldn't I? 1818, sticking on the independence trail, Chile gained independence from Spain. So, of course, España, por favor.
Por favor.
Muy bien.
Español. Muy bien.
Muy bien. Bonita casita, chico rico.
Oh.
Ah, sí.
Ah, sí. Sí, señor.
You speak with the Spanish, don't you, chap?
Increíble.
Extraordinaire.
Do you know, every ABLE word in English or IBLE word is exactly the same in Spanish, but with a different pronunciation. So, increíble, aceptable.
Bueno.
Bueno.
1852. This is an interesting fact, the sort of thing that you expect from Paul Waite to say. The first British public toilet for women opens in Bedford Street in London.
So were there already one for a man?
Before that, I just had a wee in the street. No, I mean, actually, I think they did actually used to go and wee inside their crinoline. I think that's actually true. Not a very nice thought, really, is it? 1861, Abraham Lincoln was declared president.
Lincoln.
And who wants to have a go? What number president was he? You know what I mean? Like first, second, third, whatever.
Fifth.
What, 1861? Do you know when the first one was?
1771? 1776.
So you think that there were only 5 presidents in all that time? Anyway, it's the 16th president.
16th.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's good. See, I fancy an English person knowing that. See, it's more than an American. Can you imagine an American saying John Major was the 43rd Prime Minister or something?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, so Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United
Rest
States.
in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although the only good thing about Lincoln, in my opinion, is the analogy about him in the chopping. 6 hours preparing the axe.
that.
That is but he was a hypocrite, and of course I was on the side of the Confederates. So not for slavery reasons. 19
Good to know.
1915, Kaiser Wilhelm gave an imperial order for the first ever bombing of London docks. Ooh. So, bearing in mind, who was Kaiser Wilhelm? What was the relation to him to the English king? Remember?
Cousin.
It's his cousin. His first cousin.
Yeah.
So basically, German. See, I was talking about Einsfei. Kill the English! You've got innocent planes! You've got the planes! You damn well drop the bombs! The 1,000 bomber out of London!
It's interesting because that would have been the first time. Before that, it was like just a universal rule, really, that you wouldn't kill civilians. Obviously, these things happened, but it was like a rule of war, wasn't it? So
moving on, in 1917, there's a good story. The Dutch exotic dancer Mata Hari, he was gone down in history, legend, I suppose. She was arrested in Paris, and she was eventually shot by the British as a spy. Spy for the Germans, obviously. Been a film made about her, but I can't remember who it was. One of the big Hollywood leading ladies. And then the final one we're going to do, 1921, the Soviet Red Army invaded Georgia. And of course, Georgia, who was Georgia's most famous son, Callum? You might know this.
I actually don't know.
Joseph Stalin.
Oh, of course, yes. Because I think as we've remarked on before, Stalin was Georgian, Napoleon was Corsican, and Hitler was Austrian.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is quite an interesting fact, isn't it?
So there we are. So with lots of good stuff we've brought you today.
Bringing you the news of old on This Week in History with Paul Waite.
I am Paul Waite, and this is the final part of On This Week in History. Look into the camera, Paul, for goodness sake, or you'll be told off by the Armstrong monster. So, moving on, in 1938, so something to be really proud about, the first Kinder transport carrying Jewish refugee children from Nazi Germany to the UK started. So this sort of, over the whole period of the war, which really I suppose the first 2 years, 10,000 children were saved in this manner. In Burnham-on-Sea, was very proud of Frank Fielding, for instance, as things say, Frank Fielding Way. Frank Fielding did an amazing amount of work in very dangerous circumstances and these sort of things. There's a wonderful documentary on BBC that was shown last week, actually, about the Holocaust children. Kinder transports are very dear to us. And it's just a shame, I suppose, that we couldn't do more. And I suppose we could have done more if we wanted to be. But nonetheless, there's something like, I don't know, 1 million people living today who wouldn't have been alive if it wasn't for this initiative. 1942, a truly joyous moment. Hitler's Operation Sea Lion is cancelled. So do you know what Sea Lion was?
The invasion of Britain.
The invasion of Britain. Oh, such a good chap, isn't he? Callum Joseph rocks. There we go. Yes. So what a outstanding. I love talking, particularly foreign people, about because people don't necessarily know the story of the war, and basically we were left on our own. We were left on our own against the most tyrannical empire in history.
France had surrendered. America hadn't joined the war yet.
Just amazing. And then moving on from that, just taking it to the next level, and of course very controversial this, because the Germans basically spat their dummies out over this, because it's all right for them to slaughter everyone, but 1945 the Allied planes began bombing Dresden, and we basically annihilated it. So there's a lot of bitterness over this, rightly or wrongly.
Well, they thought it was all right to smash all of Britain's monuments. They deliberately targeted sites of historical importance for us.
But the thing is, the bombers have been distanced.
Bomber Harris.
No, the British government distanced itself from the bombing campaign, which is a total disgrace. But anyway, moving on the same sort of theme, 1945, the Red Army captured Budapest after a 49-day siege. So again, I've got some of you know, I've got a couple of very good Hungarian friends and a brilliant Hungarian employee, Adrian. You are a star. Well done on passing your exams. 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations, Adrian.
And you make sure Uncle Paul will buy you lots of ice cream in the Burnham Forte Sea Parlour. And I'll also help you with your 3-point turns. In 1953, the Soviet Union broke off diplomatic relations with Israel.
Oh.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Quite a lot of...
why, do you know?
Well, obviously ideological, So, yes, a lot of Russians, lots of Israelis actually come from Russia.
Yeah, I didn't know that, yeah.
So, just going to get all the facts in. 1964, the situation in Cyprus greatly exacerbated. Thousands of Turkish Cypriots started moving into defended enclaves. And so I remember as a child, the ruler of Cyprus was a guy called Archbishop Makarios, who I used to find rather threatening, you're 5 or 6 or something, seeing him on the BBC News in his black robes. He was. And, and of course, Cyprus now is just one of the most wonderful places. It's like, to me, it's like being in England, but in the Mediterranean. Or something, that's a good way of putting it. So Callum will like this one. 1970, a man-eating tiger was caught that was reported to have killed 48 people.
Was that in Bengal?
Yeah, I'm sure.
In India.
And then another good one for Callum. 1977, a lobster was caught off Nova Scotia. Have a guess how much it weighed.
Well, I imagine quite a lot, and the reason I'll tell you is because lobsters don't actually die of old age. They only die because it gets to the point where it's so much energy required to break out of their new shells that they die of exhaustion, essentially.
Okay.
They could actually, they're technically immortal. So I imagine, I don't know, it's hard to say a guess. Maybe 10 kilos?
20.2. Can you imagine that?
That's a big...
over 3 stone.
That's a big lobster, isn't it?
Keep you happy and you're munching, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And the final one today, in 1990, bittersweet for me, this one. The USA, Britain and France basically give Germany the okay to reunify. So obviously from 1945 to 1990, we had East Germany and West Germany as separate countries. And of course, what that maybe it's the right thing to do, but of course what it has done is effectively put the Germans back as maybe the aggressors in Europe, but by stealth, shall we say.
Yeah, my sentiments exactly.
So, hope you enjoyed On This Week in History. A really good fun one today. It's really lovely when it's like joining up all the dots or something. Next, beautiful song by the Corgis, even the Corgis. Everybody's got to learn sometime.
Aspen Weight Radio Podcasts. Educate, entertain, enjoy.